Idea of nearing of the last days and what it is that you see in that formula compared to what other people see.
Well, that's a sort of a very broad question. It requires some background before I, really launch into it. But the bottom line is, well over 150 years ago now, the idea of Darwinism was put forth by Charles Darwin, which was controversial at the time, but since has been adopted by the scientific community and pretty much most of academia. Darwinism is sacrosanct. Darwinism is the new religion, not only of America, but essentially the world. The world revolves around Darwinism. Again, the scientific community looks at Darwinism as the answer to life on this planet, and that's what Darwinists adhere to and do so in basically in a religious way. It is a faith. There is no proof of Darwinism, even though Darwinists will tell you that there's proof. There is no proof of that anything evolved on this planet the way they say it did. It's just not there. And we can sit down with Darwinists all we want and, well, this turned into this and the horse evolved. Yeah, but we know that DNA does change, but hummingbirds beget hummingbirds. You'd be hard pressed to show me, and I've put this challenge out publicly, show me one species that's changing into something else. Show me a lizard that's growing wings. Just show me something. Surely something on this planet would be evolving into something else the way Darwinists tell us. And of course it's not, but that's another entirely 3-hour discussion which we could get into about Darwinism. But what Darwinism does is it has cut Christianity off from the knees. It's just boom, gone. And the Christian worldview is looked at as a joke. And yet we read in John, the Gospel of John specifically, in the beginning was the Word, the Logos, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God from the beginning. So we know that we're talking he, personal pronoun. We're talking about, someone that is with God, but he is God. So this gets into the whole Godhead. Then it said, all things were made through him, and anything that was made was not made except through him, period. I mean, that's the bottom line here. So we have a contradiction between what Darwinism says, what the Bible says. All things, he spoke everything into existence. Then when we go into the Gospels themselves, the good news themselves, which are the accounts handwritten by different people, looking at it through their personal filter, and then writing sometimes years later what they remembered of when Jesus walked the earth. And what's incredible about that, we see exactly the same thing, the same type of what we would call miracles happening when Jesus is alive and walking here, as we read in the Gospel of John, where he says all things were made through him, and without him anything was not made. I mean, that's what it says. And so Jesus is speaking things into existence. He blesses the 5 fish and the loaves, or whatever it is, 7 fish and 7 loaves, just some loaves and fish is the bottom line. And all of a sudden they feed 5,000 people. How's that possible? How is that possible? The skeptic looks at that and says, oh, it never happened. This is just mythos. We're just trying to start a religion. Really? Really? I mean, these people were put to death for what they believed in 2,000 years ago. When this stuff was written, there was no church or Rome or cathedrals or monks with funny haircuts or nuns or whatever. None of this existed. Churches with steeples. None of it existed. In fact, you didn't even have the Bible that we have today. You had the Tanakh. You had the Old Testament is what we call it. That's what you had. And so what we see is that all through the good news, Jesus is speaking things into existence. And just by his words, things change. And that, again, goes back into, well, how the heck is he going to create the universe? Well, I don't know. I wasn't there. But I believe that he did create the universe. So we have a disparity in thought. We have a disparity in ideology between, and really a disparity in paradigms between what Darwinism proposes and what Christianity proposes. And in my opinion, they're irreconcilable. You can't reconcile the two. They are antithetical from one another. One believes in a supernatural holy God who spoke everything into existence. The other one says, well, maybe sometimes millions of years ago, who knows how this all happened, but, lightning struck something and one thing changed to another, and the simplest of organisms, a protozoa, became something else, and blah, blah, blah. And yet we see that the theory is bankrupt. In Ben Stein's movie Expelled, he sits down with Richard Dawkins, and he asks Dawkins, he just poses a very simple question: where did the first self-replicating molecule come from? Of course, Dawkins doesn't know, and he states such. He says, well, Ben, Mr. Stein, no one knows. And that's true, no one knows. No one knows where the self-replicating molecule came from. Or, in fact, life on this planet, how it evolved. No one knows. And all he can offer is this: well, maybe millions of years ago, in a galaxy far, far away, I'm sort of paraphrasing here, a race of extraterrestrials who would have had to evolve themselves a very high order of civilization created us and then seeded us through the galaxy. That paradigm, that thought is called panspermia. And it's circular reasoning, because it begs, it's like the dog wagging his tail. It's like, or wag the dog type of deal. Well, where did this race of so-called highly evolved extraterrestrials come from? How did they get there? You see, it's just, it goes on forever. There is no answer, and he doesn't know it. And if he's intellectually honest, he'll say he doesn't know, and he sort of does. But then he falls back to his position. Well, it could have happened this way, and then he adds to his closing remark. The bottom line is, for him, is it just couldn't have sprung into existence. You see, we're dealing with physics on our from our three-dimensional space-time continuum on Earth, and we're looking at things through our lens, and we experience things through this biological body suit that we wear, okay? And what if there's another physics that's beyond the physics that we know? Dr. Jacobs, who we've interviewed in Watchers 7 and also in Watchers 8, talks about, now we're going to skip into the modern UFO abduction phenomena, where these people are taken from their bedrooms and floated out the window. We had Robert Salas in Watchers 8, who we interviewed, who was abducted, and he talks about his abduction for the first time on camera. And Salas basically is stating this: it's like, as I'm floating towards the window, and I'm paralyzed, I'm floating above the ground, and I'm thinking to myself, how are they going to open the window? I locked it last night. Are they going to open the window? And then he finds himself going through the window. And as Dr. Jacobs says, sort of tongue-in-cheek, everyone who's abducted goes through the window. And they wonder, how is this possible, and am I the only person that this is happening to? And to quote David Jacobs, Jacobs says, not realizing that everybody says the same thing. They all go through the window. And then Jacobs, speaks eloquently and says, and wraps it up in a summation, and basically says, everyone goes through the window, and what we're looking at is future physics, and that's what it is. So based on that, these fallen angelic beings, and that's what I believe that they are operating in a realm that we really have no idea how they do the things that they do. And to us, they seem miraculous, and in fact, they are miraculous to us. But to the entities that are coming here, it's business as usual for them. Like when Jesus is here, he walks on the water. Well, how the heck is that possible? How the heck is that possible? How do you calm a storm by saying, be still? How does one cast out legion out of the man of the tombs? How does the boat on Galilee, on the Sea of Galilee, suddenly find itself at its destination? How does Philip get transported from the Ethiopian chariot to another place? How the heck does that happen? How does Jesus pop out when he's talking to the two men in Emmaus, on the road to Emmaus, when they're sitting in a tavern someplace and Jesus is explaining the Gospels to them, and then when they break bread, he realizes, and he vanishes from their sight? How the heck is that possible? How does he walk through the wall and appear to the apostles when they're sitting in the upper room and say, here I am, guys, How does Peter escape from jail with the aid of an angel who, again, appears through the wall, opens up the jail cell, that somehow manipulates time, space, and matter, and if chains fall off of Peter, the guards are switched off, and that, by the way, is very similar to an abduction. And if they are fallen angelic beings, and there's your proof text right there. The good guys show up and get Peter out of jail. The bad guys are abducting people like Robert Salas and doing nasty things for them. So the Great Deception, all this to get to this point. This is the answer to your question. Darwinism sets up an intellectual vacuum. Where do we come from? What are we doing here? What is the purpose of life? It really sets up a deep pathos in a person. Where are our creators, if there are creators? And the movie Prometheus shows this. The movie Prometheus, several years ago, was based on a trillionaire going out into space trying to find his creator, trying to find his progenitor. That's what, and it all goes back to the same thing. So what's interesting, Darwinism is the prevailing paradigm. And when ET shows up, and they will show up, and maybe sooner than any of us think, they will literally, by the way, Chile just recently, the Chilean government came on the record saying, we know they're here, the phenomenon is real. Thank you very much. So now they join Mexico, Brazil, Mexico, Brazil, Japan, France, Belgium, Germany, the UK, other countries, all who have admitted the so-called extraterrestrial presence on the planet. When ET shows up, they will basically track right along with what Richard Dawkins has stated, that ET will claim that they created all life on this planet, that they were our progenitors, that they started the world's religions, world's earliest civilizations, and now at this critical juncture in human history, ET is back to usher mankind into a time of peace, prosperity, and knowledge. And they will come bearing gifts. They will come bearing gifts. And how do I know that? How can I be so sure? Because people have been contacted. The technology is already here. There was already a quid pro quo, There was already a quid pro quo between them and the U.S. government. Technology was given for access to the people, access to the populace, which again, echoes what we see in the Book of Enoch. So the coming Great Deception is exactly that. It may happen after some sort of a nuclear event, whether that's in the Middle East or not. I don't know, but I would assume it will be in the Middle East. What is happening in the Middle East now causes great alarm for everyone on the planet that's actually got half a brain and is looking at what's going on over there. The situation is more tense than I've ever seen it, and the prophecies of Ezekiel 38 and 39 loom out in the distance, but what's even closer than that, of course, is the prophecies of Psalm 83 and Isaiah 17, and we might be seeing some sort of fulfillment of that in the not-too-distant future.
In your travels, I've seen some of the Watcher CDs where you're in South America and other areas, and you've located different things like the elongated skulls and stuff. But you've also been in a situation where you've had people actually have devices implanted and then removed. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I'd love to. Several years ago, there were people who were scoffing at the idea of implants, and it was all illusion, and this wasn't really happening, and these were just other metallic objects, which childhood accidents which people had not remembered, and all this kind of baloney. And so I met Dr. Roger Lear 15 years ago, and at a MUFON meeting here outside of Los Angeles. I forget exactly where it was. It was south, and I drove down, and one thing led to another, and I was there to see Barry Chamish, who had just written a book about UFOs in Israel and the Nephilim returning, and of course my book had just come out, Nephilim, and volume 1 of the trilogy. And I went down and met him and showed him my book, and his jaw dropped, and we exchanged pleasantries, and he gave me a free copy, and one thing led to another, and I was introduced to Dr. Roger Lear, who I think at that time had just completed either his first or his second implant removal. So I was talking to him, and Roger, as only Roger can do, and by the way, he passed away this year, and it's a real loss to us. We miss him. We miss him greatly. He's just a wonderful man. And but Roger looked at me with this little impish smile, and he said, "Yeah, would you like to hold it?" Just like that. And he reaches in his pocket and pulls out a vial and kind of wiggles it in front of my face, and there's the implant. And my jaw just drops. I go, "You gotta be kidding me." And he goes, "Yeah, here, take a look." And so he, pops the lid over, and I pull out my hand, and there it is. I'm holding an implant from who knows where. So that was my first, meeting with Dr. Roger Lear 15 years ago. And when we started to make the Watchers series, we interviewed Dr. Roger Lear in Watchers 1. And Dr. Lear, Roger became a mainstay in all 8 Watchers. And again, we miss him greatly. He was featured in every single Watchers that we did, 1 through 8, featured very heavily in Watchers 1. And again, the skeptics were crying that, oh, no one knows about this stuff, and this is all a bunch of hooey, and they're making this stuff up. Well, okay. So we found this man who we call Bill, and he was actually changing the smoke alarms over at Richard Shaw's house. That's the co-producer of Watcher series, my business partner. And they got to talking, and we gave him a Watchers, and then Bill just happened to say, well, I think I've got an implant and I'm an abductee. So at that point we said to Bill, well, if you want it out, and he said, yeah. And so we took him in to see Dr. Roger Lear, and the first thing we did was take x-rays. And because there was a protocol that Dr. Lear put in place to weed out the wackos, and there are wackos out there who just want the attention. Bill was not a wacko, and is not a wacko, and just wanted this thing out. So the first step was, okay, we get an x-ray, and we did the x-ray. Lo and behold, there's the implant, plain as day, just where he thought it was, in his right leg, right below the knee. And we then took a Gauss meter, which measures the magnetic field. So here's this little object about the size of a pencil lead in Bill's leg, and we take a Gauss meter, and we go over this area, and it reads about 7 to 7.5 milligauss on the Gauss meter. Rick's batteries, batteries in his battery pack in a Canon 60D camera, is registering about 10 milligauss. So whatever this thing is, it's giving off a signal. Then we take another device, highly sophisticated device called a stud finder. And lo and behold, the needle points right where the object is underneath the skin. It's obviously a metallic object, and the stud finder is going off. We take another device, and then we measure what seems to be the frequency to see if it's giving off a frequency, and it is. It was giving like 335 gigahertz, and we're not sure what that's about. We then took Bill several weeks later and got a CAT scan done. Sure enough, the object is there. Then we take him, lastly, to the surgeon, and the surgeon, Dr. Matriciano, took the x-ray, placed it over Bill's leg, placed a little dot where he thought the implant was, took the ultrasound wand, put some gel on Bill's leg, and went over the area less than a minute. He found the object. That's how quick it was. Well, there it is. We'll take it out for you in 2 weeks. We're going to schedule it. So in the interim of all this, we got to interview Bill, and we found out that he was abducted at a very early age, and he's had the implant for what he thinks is 40 years. And this thing went off in his leg when he was riding his motorcycle, and the pain was so excruciating he had to ditch his bike. That's how bad the pain was. And it happened several other times, and that's why he wanted this thing out. The first time they appeared, the Greys, he fought them off. The second time he appeared, he had no choice. He went right up to the ceiling. And he remembers going up because his pajamas were flapping in the breeze. That's what was going on with that. So the day of the operation comes, and this is all in Watchers 8, by the way, and you can avail yourself of that, lamarzulli.net, lamarzulli.net. You can pick up a copy of Watchers 8. And we're in the operating room. Dr. Roger Lear is there, Dr. Matriciano, the head surgeon. Lear is excuse me, assisting. The chief scientist from A&E is there, Stephen Colburn. We've got nurses. We've got 3 camera crews. We've got 15 witnesses in the other room watching on an HD monitor, nurses and staff, the whole deal. And Matriciano, Dr. Matriciano does exactly the same procedure, takes the x-ray, puts it over Bill's right knee and looks where the implant is, makes a little dot with a magic marker, takes the gel, puts a little gel on his leg, takes the one from the ultrasound. The problem is, for the next hour and 15 minutes, he goes over a little 3-inch by 8-inch strip of skin on Bill's leg, and he can't find doodly squat. It's not there. He can't find anything. We take the Gauss meter, it's flatline, nothing. We take the stud finder's going off everywhere on Bill's body. We can't find it. After around 15 minutes, Dr. Matriciano goes, well, maybe we should get another X-ray. At this point, you know, and I'm a born-again, spirit-filled Christian, I get the tap on the shoulder from the Spirit of a living God, and he tells me to pray. So I'm in a room basically filled with non-believers, except for Richard. But I wasn't intimidated by that, and I just said, guys, this might sound really weird, but I'm going to pray, and I'm going to do it now. And I didn't ask for permission, and the prayer went something like this. Father, if there are forces that are cloaking this device, I pray that you would break it and do it soon. That's all it was. And sort of under my breath, I said, in Jesus' name type of thing, because there are Jewish people there, and I just like, you know, you can say, well, I didn't want to sound too religious, and I didn't. Out of respect for Dr. Lear, who was Jewish, I didn't want to use that word, out of respect for him and other people that were of the Jewish faith that were there. But under my breath, I said it. Less than 2 minutes later, the image shows up on the ultrasound. And the way it shows up is bizarre. It doesn't show up the way normal ultrasound objects look. It just kind of comes up from the background and just goes vroom, like an After Effect in Photoshop. That's what it looks like. We were all just astounded. And what was chilling about this, and of course then we took it out. We took it to SEAL Lab 2 days later. The object had a cocoon around it. We sliced the cocoon with a razor knife and took out the metallic implant, put it under a scanning electron microscope, and it had very, very high concentrations of iron, and the closest thing to it would be like meteorite metal, which we already sort of knew it was like. There were these like strands coming out of it where somehow we're not sure what that does, but we think perhaps that's how it docks to the nervous system. What we experienced in the room was high strangeness, with spiritual warfare at 3.0. There were forces, and I mean this, forces, and why should we be surprised? Our Bibles tell us all this stuff in Ephesians 6. We just don't believe it. There were principalities, forces of wickedness, archons in high places that knew what we were doing and sought to stop what we were doing, and basically succeeded until we called upon a power which is greater than the fallen ones, the real God of the universe, the one who created everything, Yeshua, Jesus. And when we called upon his name and we asked the God of the Bible to intervene, he did. And when he intervened, that implant showed up less than 2 minutes later. And this is what we've got, a trail of evidence from the man. There's no point of entry where the implant was. And, I mean, there it is. It's all science. And now what does the skeptics say? Right? There you go.
Well, I can tell you that a long time ago when I was a teenager, I had a UFO incident. My mother and I were in a small cabin up in Bedford, Pennsylvania in the mountains. It was a fishing lodge that we used to go to. And I have 30 minutes worth of missing time. I believe that several other times while we were at the cabin that we had the incidents that took place. And as I got married and I had my firstborn child, I came across the idea that there was this terrible forebodingness of someone or something coming to take my child away from me. And he's just literally like 6 months old or so. And I'll be honest with you, LA, it got so bad that I would sleep at night in his room with my revolver waiting for something to happen. And one night I got down on my hands and knees and I said, Lord, I can't take any more of this. I need this to stop. And the pressure disappeared and I've never had it since.
Wow. Wow.
Now, let me ask you this question.
Good.
We as Christians are taught that angels are in the spiritual realm. You know, they are spirits that are human like us. They don't maybe have bodies like us. A lot of technology going on around here in LA. We've got flying saucers. We've got little green men. You know, seems to me like there's something more happening in the physical realm and in the technological realm than maybe what we're led to believe. How do we reconcile that?
Well, I mean, look, our Bible is filled with this stuff. This is what cracks me up. And I say this excuse me, I say this at a lot of conferences that I'm at, because usually I'm in a place where people have, they know something about me. Maybe they've read a book or watched The Watchers, but there's always people that are skeptical. And the way I disarm people with this is like, we're the folks, we're the people. As Christians, we believe the virgin birth, talking donkeys, floating axe heads, 2 gold coins which appear in the mouths of a fish, men that walk on water, water that's turned into wine, staffs that become serpents and then eat other staffs which become serpents. 10 commandments which were given by God, the finger of God, written on tablets of stone, waters that part, men that are swallowed by giant fish and then regurgitated 3 days later, walls that tumble down when people just blow on horns. I mean, it's insane. It's ridiculous what we believe in as Christians. Are you kidding me? Everything I just mentioned, every single one of those events was supernatural. And this is what cracks me up. You ask a Christian, and oh yeah, I believe in that. Well, then the next thing is, well, is the supernatural manifesting now? Well, I don't really know. Well, what do you mean you don't know? Well, I just don't know. Well, 2 Thessalonians tells us that Satan comes with all signs and lying wonders. What's manifesting now? To the tune of over 2,000 sightings per month. To the tune of, different countries like Chile, Mexico, Brazil, Germany, Belgium, the UK, France, other countries, all acknowledging the so-called extraterrestrial presence, and you don't know what's manifesting? I mean, shame on us. We should be leading the charge, dominating the conversation. Instead, we're like, there's some of us that are trying to, seize back the conversation, as it were. That's the whole point of the Watcher series. But look at Ancient Aliens. It's like in season, 5 or season 6 or something now, whatever it is. They're dominating the conversation. They're the ones who are telling us ancient astronaut theory. All you have to do is get rid of that term, ancient astronaut theorist, and put fallen angelic beings, and bam, it's the same thing. They know it's true. They know it's there, but they just believe it's ancient astronauts. They believe it's ET. We look at the phenomenon and we say, no, it's not ET. These are fallen angelic beings doing exactly what we were told in prophecy they would be doing in the latter days, in the end times. Why should any of this take us by surprise? But the church just cracks me up. They're just so vehemently opposed to, what's really going on. They won't look at it. And then we get people, oh, you just got to stay close to Jesus. Well, let me get something straight here. I'm really close to Jesus because I put on the armor every day. And that armor is basically putting on Jesus. I don't know how to get any closer than I already am. And Jesus tells us what will happen in the latter days. He says, watch and be ready. Watch what? The wars and rumors of wars, famines, pestilence, earthquakes in diverse places, troublesome times. He warns us the elect would be deceived if that were possible. He warns us men faint from fear from what is coming on the earth. I mean, unless those days were shortened, no flesh would survive. I mean, why is he telling us this? This isn't the feel-good message I want to hear. This isn't what a lot of radio preachers and TV guys, are standing up there with big grins on their faces, or dancing on the steps where people come and throw their money at their feet. I mean, these are the money changers, the modern money changers in the temple. Jesus is warning us. The Middle East is imploding as I speak. The Middle East is imploding. We are witnessing the prophecies of Psalm 83, Isaiah 17, perhaps forming right in front of our eyes, and yet the church dithers, and most of the church is completely asleep and won't even talk about it. Disengage. Well, we don't want to talk about Israel anymore.
I understand where you're coming from. It's very difficult as a Christian, quote-unquote, scientist in the respect of understanding these things and seeing some of the things that we've seen and heard. If you talk about it, it's, well, you're talking paranormal. Well, you're talking the devil. And you can't talk about that because you're possessed and, you're not really a Christian. And, I take a look back, I go back to the time of Noah. And, I don't think people really realize that the real reason why the flood happened was because the bloodline of man was contaminated.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've written about that and talked about it in the Cosmic Chess Match. I mean, that's what I believe. And, there you go.
And I think today, I've heard other people as well as you say, that the aliens, quote unquote aliens, we'll just use that terminology, please, are going to offer us an opportunity. And those opportunities are going to change the DNA. They're going to change us into hybrids. And once that happens, I'm afraid that you kind of wash down your ability to be a human being.
Well, I've written about that extensively in the Cosmic Chess Match and talked about that. And yeah, I mean that's something that there's 4 criteria in the Book of Revelation that we read about, and the first one most of us know, and that is you won't be able to buy, sell, or trade without the mark of the beast. So what is the mark of the beast? Well, we know that you can't buy, sell, or trade without it, so how's that going to work? You know, go back 200 years, people would scratch their heads. Today we've got the technology. But the second criteria is that anyone who has the mark, grievous sores will appear in their body. So what's that about? Why does the mark create grievous sores on someone's body? Why does that happen? What's going on with that? The third one, which is really bizarre, it says, in those days, men and women will seek death and not find it. Well, how's that possible? What do you mean they'll seek death and not find it? Is that just metaphor? I mean, is that just a nice little fantasy, or is that really true? And, of course, I believe it's literal. I believe in the days of the mark, men and women who have the mark will seek death and not be able to find it. The fourth one, to me, is the most telling. And the judgment is severe. There's not a hint of grace and mercy. Anytime the Nephilim are on the earth, there's never a hint of grace and mercy with them. And the first time we see the Nephilim on the earth, of course, is with the flood of Noah. And we see that only 8 people are saved. And by the way, there's a vetting process that the Most High God does in vetting Noah and Noah's sons and Noah's sons' wives. And God says, Noah, you, your wife, your sons, and your sons' wives. And he does it twice, once in chapter 6, once in chapter 7. He says it twice. It's a vetting process. So there's a colleague of mine, and I like this guy. He's a great, great guy. But he's running around trying to tell people that Ham's wife was a Nephilim. And that's how the second incursion happened. Well, but that's not what Scripture tells us. And yeah, I get it. Ham's line, there's some really weird guys in there. But that's because there's a second incursion. And then the proof text of that is Moses is writing Genesis. He's writing the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. Moses is penning this hundreds of years after the events of Genesis. Hundreds, thousands of years after the flood. Moses is writing the 5 books of the Bible, the Torah. And he says, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterwards, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men and had children by them. Why would Moses write that if there was no second incursion? Why wouldn't he just write, the Nephilim were on the earth, period, in those days, period? Why would he that's all he needs to write. Because if they're all wiped out after the flood, and it's somehow, coming through the line of Ham, as my colleague says, why wouldn't he have said something like that? That's not what he says, though. He says exactly the opposite of that. He says, and remember, he's writing over 1,000 years after the event. And he's pointing back to Genesis. He's going, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men and had children by them. He's not talking about what happened then. He's talking about what happened after the flood. And the judgment is the same in the days of Noah with the Nephilim, think about this, as it is when we get to Sodom and Gomorrah. Why is it that the men of Sodom and Gomorrah want to have sex with the 2 angels that come into the town? Why is it that they know who they are? Why is it that they refuse to have sex with Lot's daughters. They want the men. They want the angelic beings because they know that's where the power is. Why is it in the Tower of Babel, Nimrod, and you can, this is in my book, The Cosmic Chess Match, make a strong case that when we take the words in the Hebrew, it can read that Nimrod became a Nephilim through ritualistic sex magic. Jumping forward into modernity, Aleister Crowley, ritualistic sex magic. Babylon Working, Jack Parsons, ritualistic sex magic. In modernity, Babylon Working, opening up a gateway through ritualistic sex magic and allowing the old ones, the fallen beings, to come through. That's what's going on there. Then we get finally to the conquest of Canaan. Joshua and Caleb come up. Who's there? The Nephilim are there. How did they get there? What are we looking at? Why are they in the Promised Land? This is all written, and this is the move, counter move, classic war in the heavens, which is being fought on planet Earth literally for millennia. And that's exactly what we see. The Nephilim are there. And so what we see all through the Bible, and we get that mandate from Joshua, God gives it to Joshua, wipe everybody out. It's always the same mandate. Anybody who is a Nephilim, there's never any grace and mercy. In the flood, in Babel, in Sodom and Gomorrah, and in the conquest of Canaan, there's not a shred of grace and mercy. Skip forward to the fourth criteria, the mark of the beast. Anyone who has the mark winds up in the lake of fire. There's no grace and mercy. Grievous sores appear. Can't buy, trade, or sell without it. Men will seek death in those days and not find it. Four criteria. I believe that the mark changes the host DNA and creates essentially a modern Nephilim. It does something to the human host so that they are no longer human. You say, well, LA, that's just preposterous. Oh, is it really? They're already messing with the stuff, already doing it. They're already making movies like Splice to try to condition the people. Look at the movie Avatar, James Cameron, Blockbuster a few years back. It's all right there, right in front of us, screaming at us. And it's coming. And when the fallen ones appear, they'll give us two things. When ET shows up, they'll give us free energy, which changes the planet and seems like a good thing. And they'll also, because they will say, but we created you, that's what they're going to say, they'll also have a DNA upgrade. Now, this is my hypothesis. They'll have a DNA upgrade. All you need to do is just take this little chip, and it will change you into a better humanoid, because we created you guys in the first place. Here's the DNA upgrade. Now you'll live 300 to 500 years disease-free. Wow, won't that be great? And that ties into the days of Noah, because one of the specifics of the days of Noah was the length of the lifespan was between 500 and 900 years old. So that's what I'm positing will happen when the fallen ones return.
Well, I enjoy the insight that you're bringing to the show tonight, and for those of you who are interested, we're here at 347-855-8164 if you want to call in and talk to LA for a moment. This is really good stuff. I think that some of my friends that are MUFON members would, of course, disagree with some of the things that we're talking about, but in general,
sure, of course.
Organizations like MUFON and some of the other organizations that are out there dealing with UFOs are much further closer to the truth than the churches are. I mean, you know, you hear about ostriches that are capable of burying their head on the ground. Well, we know they don't really do that, but the churches are very much like that. They simply are burying their head. Every time there's a discussion about this, it turns the opposite way, and they go a different direction. And unfortunately, it's not really helping believers be ready for the end times. You know, one of the things that I really love is I listened to a gentleman preach not too long ago was that the church is at a position in life where we just want Jesus to come and take us all away. In the process, we don't care about anything else. You know, we just get some people saved and watch the end of the world come, and we're all going to be happy.
I'm not sure what the question is.
Well, not so much a question is a respect that without these connections that you're making, and people who may be listening out there, church members and some other Christians are out there, there's nobody actually talking about this in the respect of the biblical sense as you are. And I commend you for taking the ground that you are and holding on to it as long as you have. It just amazes me that there are not more people coming forward from the Christian community to say this is what's happening and what's going on.
Well, more and more people are waking up, which is exciting. And you know, I'm on the trail, not only with the UFO thing, but obviously the Nephilim, and looking for DNA evidence which will prove the biblical narrative. There's a saying that the late David Flynn brought to my attention, but it was also, I believe, Dr. I.D.E. Thomas's book also had it, which sort of astounded me. And it's a quote that both men use from Sir Isaac Newton, and basically it says this: Isaac Newton wrote that about the time of the end, the body of men will be raised up, who will believe in the literal interpretation of the prophecies amidst much clamor and opposition. And that's exactly what is going on. There is an element that is just on both sides of the aisle, Christian and non-Christian, who are just incensed about this information. It makes you wonder what, you know, we're just, like for instance with the implants, until we did the surgery, and there's a whole chain of evidence with the surgery that shows, you know, who's Bill and what's happening in his story, and you know, it's undeniable. It's my cell phone going off. That, you know, all of a sudden they're strangely silent. You know, I mean, what are they going to do? Why don't you guys prove us wrong? In other words, you know, you sit there and you throw darts, blah, blah, blah. We spent the money. You know, it wasn't cheap to take out the implant. It was like $5,000 for the surgery. I mean, are you kidding me? You know, the implant testing under a scanning electron microscope, another $800. I mean, where do you think the money's coming from? We're putting the money up ourselves. You know, sometimes we get donations from people, but, you know, we're putting the money up because we believe in what we're doing, big time. And we want to prove to the world what's going on. So all of a sudden, you know, and you'll see this in Watchers 8, you know, the critics are strangely silent. I mean, we're not making this stuff up. We're not making it up. It's hardcore scientific evidence. You know, you can try to shoot me all you want to, and the skeptics will do it, but you can't prove us wrong. You know, you can't go to Bill and say, hey, Bill, did you put that implant there? Where did that thing come from? You can't make it up that suddenly it was switched off from another source, that the Gauss meter didn't work, that nothing worked. You know, why is that? You know, what are we looking at here? And you know, people really need to wake up and understand that you know, something is going on. And I think some of these people, with all due respect, protest way too much. They got an axe to grind, and they attack the researchers, not the evidence. You know, they basically engage in ad hominem attacks, and that's okay. I know who you are, and I really don't care what you think of me. But you can't refute the evidence. You know, you can jump up and down, and you can try to make fun and tell us we're all kooks and everything else. But for instance, like when the mitochondrial DNA, which was Lloyd Pye took out of Peru, he took some samples out of Peru 3 years ago. So this is before I even knew that the elongated skulls were even there in Peru. And he took samples and took it to his geneticist because he was working on the Star Child skull. And the geneticist gave Brian Forrester and myself the results of the testing, and he did it 3 times. And the testing was that certain segments of the mitochondrial DNA did not match anything in the genome. You would have thought that, you know, we did some heinous crime here. Archaeologists in Peru, bad archaeology, blah, 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 because there was no chain of evidence and it wasn't done through the proper channels because Lloyd Pye had taken the sample out, what they would call illegal. We're just talking a little chip of bone here. We're not talking a whole skull. We're a little chip of bone to test with the geneticist. And then, you know, somebody from another Christian website, and I won't mention which one it was, goes, well, the sample was contaminated. And I wrote the author. See, they never come to me and ask me what happened. Oh, no, they think they know everything. And so this person basically lied. And I'm not going to tell you what website it is because I'm not going to, you know, stoop to their level.